Yeah, I mean, just
let anybody know.
Okay. All right. Take your seats. We're going to get started here in just a couple minutes. Good, sir. How are you?
All right.
Good. Good to see you. All right. Just for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and get this started now. First, thank you all for taking the time to show up. And for those that are online that are watching right now, thank you as well. Tonight, we hope to be informative. Please ask lots of questions. I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions. This is, Jay, how many have you done so far? Okay, so this is number 6. So by this point, it should be 7. So it should be nice and polished by this point. So please ask lots of questions. I mean, we have a wealth of knowledge in this room. I mean, from our MPOs, we have our city manager, we have our assistant city manager, we have directors here as well. And so somebody, hopefully, in this room is going to be able to answer your questions. And if not, we can certainly go back and get those answers for you. If you haven't already, or at the end, if you don't mind just signing in so we can track who all was here, then if we can also get you signed up for the newsletter so you can get our information. And then just a quick plug real quick. For anyone whose house was damaged recently, we're still working on what the plan's going to be for some of the extra trash pickup and the limbs pickup as well. So hopefully you'll get an email or just follow us on Facebook. You'll see some of the updates there as well. And if you have any neighbors who are without AC or if they had major damage and you believe that they, low income and they could possibly qualify for some of our priority home repair programs, reach out to us and we can certainly get you in touch with the right folks to see if we can't get them the help. So I know firsthand dealing with insurance companies is not fun. So with that being said, without further ado, I'm going to go and kick it over to our city manager, Jay Chapa.
Thank you, Councilman. Good evening. Thank you all for coming out today. A lot of folks I recognize in the room. We're here to provide you with the where we are currently on the FY2027 budget. Per state law, unlike the federal government, we have to put together a balanced budget on an annual basis. City Council has to approve it in September. Currently, we have it timed out to have it scheduled. The City Council would vote on it on the 15th of September. We have a upcoming budget hearing this coming Tuesday on the 1st at City Hall, where 2 o'clock, right? At 2 o'clock, and where the council will be open. Anyone can show up, provide feedback to the City Council. This is still a work in progress. On August 11th, I provided the City Council with the city manager's recommended budget, basically the budget that we put together with me and my staff. As you'll see as you go through here, the overall operating budget is $3.3 billion. So, and then if you add in capital, it's over $4 billion. But the $3.3 billion, what everybody kind of thinks about is the general fund, which is police, fire, TPW, parks, all those kind of things, that is funded primarily through property taxes and sales taxes. That fund is 1/3 of the 3.3 billion. It's 1.1 billion. And one of the things that people sometimes have a hard time when we talk about having a imbalance between the growth of the city and how our TAD projections have come out and created a gap is they don't understand how we can't find cuts from the 3.3 billion to shore up that gap. The issue is that we have to make those cuts only from the general fund. And as you see, I'm going to introduce Christiane Simmons, our director of the Fort Worth Lab, which handles our budgeting. As she goes through the presentation, our goal this year, as we continue to grow, one of the things that we've heard loud and clear from the citizens and from our council is that we want to ensure that our first responders and our public safety grow with the growth of the city to make sure that we keep up with response times and those kind of things. So you're going to see where we did grow this year is pretty much in the public safety area. So where we had to cut was everybody else but the public safety area. And so when you're thinking about how that lays out, you'll see that only about 40% of the general fund is where we had to go find cuts in the overall process. So with that, I'm going to introduce Christiane Simmons. I'll be here to answer questions. You can ask questions as she goes along. Just raise your hand. We are live on the city's live stream, so we ask that you wait till you get a mic so everybody can hear your questions, or you can wait till the end and have the questions, and we have plenty of folks here that can answer as we go along. So Christiane.
Thank you. I'll grab my clicker. I don't know if I love the promise the council member made that I'm going to be like polished. I might be more chaotic as these meetings go along because I'm like, did I say that yet? I don't know. So this is number 7, and I'm happy to be with you here in District 4. My name is Christiane Simmons, like Jay mentioned, and I'm the director of the Fort Worth Lab. We do the city's budget, data, and performance. Have some staff members here too that can help answer questions, but we're really happy to be engaging with you as part of the budget process. If you took the budget priorities survey earlier in the summer, we also appreciate that. This is just a continuation of the engagement that we tried to do through the spring and summer. So thank you. So I'm going to start just with some high-level themes. Every budget year has its themes that emerge, and Jay alluded to this a bit, but one of the themes this year, kind of the main story about fiscal year 27, is that the city's population growth and the growth that we all see and the traffic we all just sat in and all of that isn't necessarily producing the property tax revenue or the tax values that we may have been forecasting. And this is primarily due to the activities of the Tarrant Appraisal District. And so some of you, probably all of you, as engaged folks, know that the Tarrant Appraisal District adopted a reappraisal plan by which they're only reappraising residential properties every other year. So we've had frozen values for 2 years now, with the first reappraisal coming for the next budget year. So you'll get that, in January. And we knew about that reappraisal plan, of course, at the city level. We sit in 4 appraisal districts, but Tarrant is the biggest for us. About 92% of our property tax revenue and values come from Tarrant. So we began forecasting that drop in revenue. But what happened this year that we didn't necessarily have precedent for was also the values were frozen, and TAD is granting protests and a lot of mid-year value loss, mid-year litigation. And so while we were estimating really conservative growth in our values, about 2%, we actually came in under 1% due to a lot of those protests being granted and that mid-year litigation. And so while we started out projecting about a $49 million budget gap, we grew at certain points in the process to, you may have seen 78 or 80. Really at the peak, after we'd added some public safety costs, it was like 94. So we've been dealing with quite a big budget gap for a number of months now. We do have a balanced budget to present to you today that council has been reacting to. And like Jay mentioned, this is still a work in progress. But we were really trying to make equitable reductions while investing primarily in public safety. That is what's important to residents every time we survey. Police and fire come out on top, as well as streets and some other parks and library, other service level impacts that we wanted to minimize. And then we still want to sustain our pay-go tax rate, which we'll talk about, but that's capital maintenance. We know as a growing city, we don't want to decrease our investment in capital maintenance. So I'll go through a couple of highlights here. This is just a snapshot. If you were at an earlier meeting, you may not have seen this. We added it kind of late. I think it was like meeting 5 or something that I finished the presentation and somebody said, I still don't understand why we have a gap in property tax values. So we thought this could be a helpful comparison. So on the top, if you can see the yellow line, that's Collin County, and then Dallas County below, and then Tarrant at the bottom. So this is the last few years of average taxable value, this figure that we get from the appraisal district. And so you can see as Collin and Dallas grow, their taxable values on the residential side are growing, and Tarrant's are kind of flat and now falling. Now by showing you this, I'm not saying like that this is wrong or right. That I think this shows that Tarrant's plan is probably working as intended, and you might be in favor of that. That's okay. But this does affect our property tax revenue. If you imagine, as values fall, our revenues are affected. Okay, so we'll go through some numbers. $3.32 billion is the fiscal year 27 operating budget. Jay quoted that figure. And here are some, I call them like nerdy finance tables to show you kind of how that $3.32 billion breaks up. I also have some charts and graphs for those of you who are chart and graph people. But the main three operating funds are the general fund, number one. That's our biggest operating fund and about a third of the total budget. And so Jay mentioned this too, but when you think of the general fund, think of things like police and fire, transportation and public works, code compliance, parks and libraries, those really core city services funded in the general fund. The second big category of operating funds is enterprise funds. So those are the ones that they're not funded by taxes, they're funded by user fees and rates. So they kind of operate like a business. Think of the water department, for instance. Solid waste is another example. And then the third biggest category of operating funds is special revenue. Special revenue funds they have a restricted revenue source that's restricted for that use. So like dedicated revenue, restricted use. The best example of this is CCPD. So many of you are familiar with the Crime Control and Prevention District. In that case, the dedicated revenue source is the half-cent sales tax, and the restricted use is crime control and prevention. So any expense in CCPD has to be tied to crime control and prevention. So those are kind of the big three, but you can see the growth there, about 7.5% across all the operating funds, including the general fund, which we'll spend a little more time on shortly. So I mentioned kind of how our gap grew and fell through the process. Again, we started out with council back in April telling them we're facing about a $49 or $50 million gap due to the kind of flow of property tax revenue. But through the process, as we added contractual obligations for police and fire and some other big expenses, if I was gonna say like at a snapshot in time, the worst time ever, it was up to $94 million. So I wanna walk through just a couple of things that we did along the way. We went through this in detail with council on August 11th. So if you're really interested in a deep dive on the process of the budget, that is available at that, like if you want to stream that meeting. So from the beginning, because we knew we were facing a gap, we asked departments to like do their initial belt tightening. So we provide departments a target budget that they have to meet. I'm talking general fund departments. And so when we provided those targets for fiscal year 27, we'd already reduced them by 1%. So just initial like belt tightening as a good fiscal practice. We also asked them to submit an additional 3% in reduction packages, is what we call them. The 3% reductions, all kinds of ideas departments have. Sometimes you'll see some of them here because we've taken a lot of the 3% reductions. Sometimes it's like non-essential contracts or moving positions to another fund if they have access to another fund that's eligible. Certainly travel and training and some other minor operating expenses. And that's a good practice too in a big budget to look at those things year over year. But we had to go through some deeper cuts as the tax values continued to roll in, and certainly by the time we got the certified values at the end of July, we had to look for some deeper cuts even beyond those 1% and 3% cuts. So you'll see some of those reductions and what they're tied to, but it's about general employee pay and eliminating vacant positions and freezing vacant positions. So there's a lot of cuts in that $28.5 million. So 1% and 3% reductions, about $22 million, another $28 million in deeper cuts. We always look at revenue along the way too. So there were some revenue increases, which we can talk about. And then we're still facing about a $37 million gap after all of that. And so in order to not further cut into or affect service levels for some of our programs that are not public safety, Jay opted to propose a tax rate increase to council on the 11th. The tax rate increase was currently, or on the 11th, proposed at 3.2 cents. So this year it's 67 cents per $100 valuation taxable value, and it would be 70.2 cents next year. If you've engaged with the budget before, or maybe even the bond, you might be familiar with this rate breakout. So total tax rates on the left, 70.2 cents, and then it breaks into operations and maintenance and debt. So the bottom portion is debt. That's the portion of the rate that supports like the bond programs, for instance, that we always said, we won't change that as a result of the 2026 bond, and we didn't, you can see there. But operation and maintenance and the blue boxes are where all of the tax rate growth goes this year. So operations on the top right, that's 48.2 cents, and that supports the general fund's operations. So again, police, fire, transportation, parks, libraries. And then in Fort Worth, we further break out the operations portion of the rate into capital. So 7.25 cents goes to what we call PAYGO, or cash funded capital maintenance. So rather than funding like pothole repair, for instance, in debt, or letting those streets fall into the debt program or the bond program, we fund them with cash as we go, and that's funded by the property tax rate. So we have that dedicated cash source. So like everybody's mentioned, this is a work in progress, so we haven't finalized the budget yet. So here are a couple things that have happened since we proposed the recommended budget on the 11th. The first is, these are council reactions and changes we've made in response. So the first thing, on the 11th, one of the recommendations from Code as part of their 3% reduction exercise was to close the PetSmart Alliance location, which is up near here. So council was not in favor of that, as I can hear many of you are not in favor of that. And so we did make a change since then, and so it's now considered back in the budget. So that was one thing. That came with some people, and it would have pushed animals to, other existing city shelters. It certainly would have affected the live release rate that we've been talking about a lot this year. And so that's one cut that most of council was not comfortable with. There were also some employees or positions, vacant positions, that we'd proposed to either freeze or eliminate as part of the budget in order to balance the budget. But some of them were tied to public-facing services, again, like parks and libraries. You see some in development services, so think about customer service for people who are coming to pull permits and that kind of thing, transportation and public works, and code. And so we asked departments, after council was reacting to some of these service level impacts, we asked these departments to go back and say, if you could restore any of the positions that we currently have frozen or eliminated, what would those be? And so each department head turned in a list of positions that they felt would really have the biggest programmatic impact. So for example, parks put back some parks maintenance positions, some recreation positions. And so council, last we talked to them, which was, what day is it? I don't even know. Was it Tuesday? Friday, last Friday. We talked to them last Friday and showed them if we restore those positions and the PetSmart Alliance location, and then we made some increases to general employee pay for performance at a council request, then the tax rate would be not 70.2, but 70.565, because it costs about $4 million to put these items back into the budget. And so right now, again, not final, but it seems the majority of council was comfortable at the 70.565. So that's what it would look like, 70.565. Again, all the growth still going to that operations portion of the tax rate, because again, that's where the operating salaries and benefits for those positions comes from. I'll mention, because I kind of skipped over pay for performance, police and fire, like sworn personnel, they're funded by contract. So we have like labor contracts with each of those departments, and their pay raises are prescribed through those contracts, so the budget reflects those. But general employees get paid through a merit-based system, pay for performance, once a year. And as part of the balancing, we had reduced that amount to a 1.5% raise. It's usually budgeted at 4%. So we bumped it to 3, down to 3, but implemented mid-year, so 1.5% on the budget. Council also did not love that. They wanted to also take care of general employees that may not be civil service. So that's kind of that's the add back there. This is that same process slide, but just showing you that it's still going along with council's recommendations. $4 million to restore those items. $4 million is what you kind of garner from going from the 70.2 to 70.5 cents. And we'll go through just a couple highlights per council priority. So if anybody doesn't know, council has 5 overarching strategic priorities. So we like to group, when we talk about budget and sort of highlights, that's how we group them. Starting with community safety. And so Jay mentioned that most of the adds to this budget are in the community safety priority. Again, that's certainly what we hear from council and what we hear from residents in the community survey and the budget priorities, a survey that we did earlier this summer. Police, fire, EMS, and like 911 come out on top in those surveys. And so we've added funding in a number of places. We did make one shift in the budget that I just want to clarify in case there were any confusion along the way. We've talked about the Fire Hope program a couple of times during this budget. That's the homeless outreach, prevention, education team in fire. And they have 4 firefighters that are assigned to that program. And so the budget doesn't stop the program, but it shifts those firefighters back into fire stations and instead continues the Hope work using the EMS side of the fire department through a mobile integrated health team. So it just sort of pivots the work. And the reason that creates a budget savings is because when you have firefighters that aren't fighting fires and instead are doing Hope work, you have to backfill their positions like in the fire stations or on the fire trucks. And so by shifting them back into fire suppression and continuing the work through the mobile health team, it keeps the work going, but it does produce an overtime savings there. The rest of them are additions. So fire overtime and fire fleet, we did add funding to what we call right size both of those budgets. So I want to make sure that fire department has the right amount of budget available to meet their contractual obligations. And we're seeing fleet costs go up across the city, but fire just happens to have some of our more expensive vehicles, and we're having a little more trouble absorbing those costs for vehicle repair and maintenance. On the police side, we continually look at police staffing as the city grows and want to make sure that they are also growing appropriately to continue to meet response time goals and proactivity goals. And so this budget does recommend adding 76 patrol officers. And those would be spread all over the city at the chief's discretion. We also create corporal positions in this budget. So there are 30 of those. They're kind of flipping officers into corporals in order to create a promotional path in patrol. Right now, if you want to promote within the police department and you're a patrol officer, you have to go away from patrol to take your next job. So you have to go be like a detective in an investigative unit or a corporal in a specialized unit. And sometimes they don't get back to patrol as fast as they might want to, or they don't come back at all. And so I think the chief's excited about that promotional path being available. It also enables them to do more consistent field training and be available operationally in patrol. So that's a good thing. And then the last one here is emergency management and communication. So think calling 911 or non-emergency. This year, we piloted a program with them that's assistive call taking technology for non-emergency calls. And so that saves like workload hours for the call takers who are handling the more complex 911 calls by doing AI triage of the non-emergency number. So it had some really good metrics in its pilot. So the department would like to fund that full time for fiscal year 27. So that's an add to the emergency management and communications budget. All right, we'll talk a little bit about infrastructure. So I mentioned that we wanted to keep our investment in the PAYGO rate. So that's the 7.25 cents. But remember, I showed you that chart where the values are falling. So as values fall and then we apply the tax rate, we garner or gain a little less revenue than the current year. So we see a small reduction in PAYGO, 2.8 million of about 80 million. And that's spread a little bit across the buckets. You'll see where it doesn't reduce parks and doesn't reduce TPW much. But it does reduce neighborhood services, and I'll tell you why. This budget also authorizes the pavement management fee. So some of you might know this as the street maintenance fee if you've been paying attention to these conversations over the last couple of years. As we get closer to implementing that, we're renaming it the pavement management fee. And that's just like a minor change, but it kind of reflects better that we're not just doing reactive maintenance, but really proactive planning for the pavement and its life cycle across the city. And then water has a sizable capital program as the utility continues to expand alongside the city. And so this budget continues water's capital program, including the cast iron replacement program. So community investment, again, the goal here was to really minimize service level impacts, but still have to balance the budget, and to avoid any widespread closures of libraries or community centers. If you pay attention to much municipal news, you know cities are grappling with these kinds of issues, and we really wanted to avoid closures. You can see our strike through there on Alliance PetSmart, so sounds like that's a good thing for everyone. I know that Code didn't love putting that out as an option. And so I think we found a solution for that with a majority of council. The budget does still reduce the priority repair program by 3%, $75,000. That program is funded in PAYGO, and it's $2.5 million, and then they get another $2 million in grants, so about $4.5 million for that program. So it's a small reduction, like in the grand scheme of things, maybe 5 to 7 houses less over the year, but still, yeah, a small reduction there. Also, there's about a quarter reduction in the mobile tool shed program. That was a new program this year, and it's going well. But again, when we're trying to balance continue programs, but also balance the budget, this was an idea that Code had where they could shift one person into code activities, and maybe there's a slightly longer wait time for tools than there is now. So it's a minor service level impact. And then the neighborhood services reduction that I mentioned, we'll see it a couple more times in the presentation, is around the neighborhood improvement program. So right now we fund one neighborhood a year through a data-driven selection process. And it's a 3-year, we fund it all in 1 year, but it's a 3-year capital delivery program. But what we've seen is typically year 1, there are a lot of planning activities that go on with the neighborhood. So the different city departments come together and they meet with the residents and the community organizations in that neighborhood, and they kind of plan, they make the plan. And so that's not a very high year 1 spend typically of the 3. And so what we've done is instead of funding all $4 million in year 1, you'll see it later, but it goes from $4 million to like $1 million because we've never seen a spend of more than $1 million in year 1. And then we'll bump it up in year 2, and then it'll tail off in year 3. So just by smoothing that funding, it helped to balance the budget for this year, but it also reflects the actual activities that have been occurring naturally in the neighborhood improvement program. And then finally, we had a pilot this year called NetForce. It was the Nuisance Enforcement Task Force. And the city's tagline for that was to become a nuisance to the nuisance properties. And there were 3 pilot properties, and we saw good results. And so Code would like to continue that program next year. Would you like to describe NetForce, Brian? He would. He was nodding his head emphatically in the back. He was like this. Yeah. Here he comes.
How's it going? Code Compliance Director Brian Doherty. It was an initiative where it's multi-departmental, so rather than police would respond to a few calls at a nuisance property, and then code would work at some code violations, environmental may have to go out there for health concerns. This was more coordinated and strategic, where we would proactively go out to these properties with, I believe it was about 5 departments. It'd be fire, code, environmental, health, planning, and police, yes. And we would take any and every violation would be addressed, and we would proactively be going out there even when they had corrected some of the violations. And it was really to become a nuisance to these nuisance properties. And out of the 3 areas that we had, one of them closed down voluntarily. It was Rockies 1. Eco Motel, which has been a nuisance for like 30 years, has a dangerous building order on it from our Building Standards Commission for all 6 buildings, and could be subject to demolition in the next like week or 2. We got to do a follow-up inspection when their time is done. And then the Sandy Oaks Apartments that we worked, they corrected over 800 code compliance violations and decided they had had enough and has put the property up for sale. So that's really the goal, is you got to get movement, you got to get something different, because what we had been doing wasn't working. So I think that answer. There we go. I heard it here. No problem.
All right, and I had a question about some of the recent neighborhoods that have been in the neighborhood improvement program. So if any would like to shout those out, I was looking them up, but then I had to come back. So yeah, Jay, do you know off the top of your head? Stop 6 was one of the early ones, and we haven't announced the one for next year yet, right? Ash Crescent. Stop 6, Ash Crescent.
Ash Crescent, Northside, Fairhaven.
There you go.
Worth Heights, Seminary.
There you go.
Historic Marine, Las Vegas Trail, Rosemont.
He's a genius. Yeah.
New Mitchell.
Yeah. It depends on the neighborhood.
They're the neighborhoods that have, so we do a data-driven review of all the neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods that have high crime, high poverty, low education, missing infrastructure, And the idea is not to go and do a lot of social services. It's more of how can we come in with a program that's going to better the neighborhood from an infrastructure side. So some of it's been, so you get the neighborhood together, the folks in the neighborhood, then these are our top items. We want better lights in our parks, more sidewalks to get to the park, cameras in the park, for instance, for redoing certain streets because they're in bad shape, those kind of things. And so then that's what the $4 million gets programmed to, and that gets done in that neighborhood. Lots of times when it first started in Stop 6, you had areas where the right-of-way had been overgrown because there was no houses there, and when all got cleared out, all of a sudden builders came in and started building homes because sidewalks got put in, those kind of things. And so there's been success, and that's why the city's kind of carried it on year after year. But you kind of deal with one neighborhood, and then you move to the next one. And the idea is to try to make an impact so that hopefully then with things like the mobile tool shed, then maybe that folks in the neighborhood will start taking care of it on their own and improve it as they go along. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, got to use the mic.
Sorry. Have you guys, as a city or whoever on the Alliance PepSmart, have you guys not talked to them to see if it could be a tax write-off for them to help you with this adoption center?
Well, it is. That's why the city partnered with them, they put a lot of resources into it also, help support it, grants and those kind of things. It was one of the things as we went through the whole process, we were trying to have the least amount of impact on the cuts that we were making, right? And not that the adoption center, where it was going to impact the most is our live release rate. Wasn't necessarily going to impact picking up stray dogs and those kind of things into the neighborhoods. And so that's why it was one of them on the list that made the cut. It's about $500,000 that it costs the city in order to keep it going. And it's not huge, but when you add all those numbers together, it's how we got to about the $54 million in cuts. And we knew that was going to be something, especially, I have a dog, animal lover. Folks are going to say, well, that's a bad idea. But at some point, when you're trying to reduce costs, you got to pick and choose the things that make sense. But as Christiane said, the same reaction you all had is the same reaction a lot of our council members had. And so now, for now, it's looking like it's back in the budget, and the council wants it to fund it. So. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. You got it.
I have a question, Jay. You just mentioned in regards to the neighborhoods that needed some more safety improvements, and then you mentioned like the tool shed that would help them, provide them with tools to clean up and leaf blowing and all of those things. But then in the budget, you cut it by 25%. But of course, the tool shed is the whole city of Fort Worth. So
right.
Who made the decision? It's a brand new program. You didn't even give it right off the ground, and now it's cut by a fourth.
Again,
who made that discussion? And if you're saying help these neighbors that need tools to maybe clean up their area, can you give me a little insight on that?
So it was a recommendation that was brought forward on the 3% cuts by code. And the reason is because the program's not going away. So right now, if you call and you want tools delivered because you need to mow your yard and edge it and those kind of things, they'll schedule it and they bring it to you. You might get it in 3 days. The reduction, or it might be a week, whatever the dates are that it takes to get it right, it's just going to add to the time that it takes to get it. It's not going to eliminate the program. So it's more of it was a way to reduce some costs without doing away with the program. It's more of you have to wait a little bit longer to get the service. And
The fee and the higher gas prices because you all have the tools.
it's the people. So it's going, so code.
Which would be the gas prices and I guess the employees that you have, so they're not like, I gotta go here, gotta go here, gotta go here.
So code compliance has a code person
Right.
that works in this area doing code work. The same type of person's working on the tool shed. There's vacancies, so less code is being done because there's vacancy over here that doing the regular code work, checking for code violations. The recommendation was to take a tool shed person, move them to that kind of work, and reduce the tool shed person by group from 4 to 3, and that's where the savings is. The savings is reducing a person from that group. So the time it takes to deliver, you have one less person delivering tools. It's going to take a little longer to deliver.
Okay, and I just do want to comment. Whoever came up with that design and idea is just so beneficial to neighbors that can have access to some of those things, like to cut a tree limb. So I really do appreciate the city of Fort Worth on having those things, and they're maintained. Is not like
He's over there, and my first meeting as city manager, that I sat down with every single director. I sat with everybody for an hour. My hour with him, in the first 15 minutes, he brought up this idea, and I said, well, why aren't we doing it? He said, well, we don't have any money. I said, well, we're going to do it. And so I took it to the council. And it was a pilot. The pilot was beneficial, and that's why we put it in. The intent was never to reduce it. In fact, it was more to grow it long term. It's just we're in this budget situation. So.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
You eliminated the Code Ranger program, but I understand quite a few of those positions were volunteer positions. So how much did it save you by cutting Code Ranger?
So the Code Ranger program is volunteers, and when they went through to look at what the Code Rangers did or didn't do, typically folks would have an issue in their neighborhood, get motivated, volunteer, address the issue, and then stop participating. And it would take 2 code compliance folks to coordinate all these people, where you could just put those 2 people to work on the issues, and they'd handle about 8 times of, because they're trained in it, than the Code Ranger work was doing. So it's not that it's a bad program. I think it's a good way to involve people. Just the outcome wasn't producing what it needed to be. So, and I won't say this for Brian, but it's kind of the budget situation helped us define that this program really should have gone probably before, but nobody wanted to get rid of a volunteer program, so it makes it hard, right? So I'm not recommending we have our money back for it to come back, because it doesn't make sense. Any other questions? You want to keep going, or did you
keep going? Keep going.
She's got a lot
Okay.
more.
It's not a lot more. Okay, it's kind of a lot more. Let's see. Okay, we're going to move on. Economic development. Main reduction here is we're hoping temporary, but right now the general fund transfers money into a special revenue like life to date fund that's called the Economic Development Initiatives Fund. And this is in order to, it's business attraction and strategy. Some cities that we compete with have dedicated sales tax for economic development. We don't have that in Fort Worth. We dedicate a portion of our sales tax to CCPD, for instance. So this is kind of our hybrid option of allowing still to be competitive in the business attraction sphere. So that fund, however, does have a budget. And again, we're trying to minimize service level impacts, and that doesn't necessarily have a programmatic impact that you would feel next year. And so we've reduced that transfer out of the general fund by 90% for fiscal year 27. So it went from a $5 million transfer to just $500,000. So we'd like to keep some funding stream going to the initiatives fund, but that is a transfer that is highly reduced for next year. The budget for economic development, however, does continue partnership with local chambers, including small business development. The budget also reflects the movement or transition of Will Rogers to a third-party management agreement. You may be familiar with that transition coming up. And then the budget adds a position to support neighborhood revitalization efforts and economic development through the city's targeted revitalization efforts. Last category is responsible growth. This is one of those that's like, there can be a lot of things that are in this category. So we've highlighted just a few things here. The city will continue to replace vehicles and equipment. We have a backlog of vehicles and equipment across our departments that should be replaced. But we will do that for next year out of tax notes, which is the debt side of the budget. And so you'll see a drop in property management's budget. That's because they're the ones that hold the budget for vehicles and equipment. So that's like a reduction or a shift in order to save general fund dollars or balance the budget. We also, a lot of departments' budgets grew by a hair for group health. So the city self-insured, we've seen higher costs of claims, health claims, including pharmacy, particularly GLP-1s and some other classes of drugs. We've talked to council about this a couple of times, most notably in the June 2nd work session, if you, again, would like a deep dive into this topic. But the main takeaway here is that in the general fund, really across all funds, but including the general fund, city departments' budgets have grown by 40% in order to keep that group health fund or restabilize the group health fund. And we can talk more about that if helpful. But when you see the departments in a minute and you see those that are flat or even reducing, you need to know that their budgets actually already grew by 40% in the employer contributions to the group health fund. We did not pass any of that to the employees. That was not city management's perspective on what the right thing to do was. Let's see. This budget also provides support for public information requests or open records requests, which are like the state required timeline for responding to questions from the public. We continue to see an uptick in those. And so we've continued to fund those positions. They're actually moving this year from the city secretary's office over to communications and public engagement. So there's a little bit of a shift in who's doing that. We've talked a little bit about the inflation in vehicle and maintenance. We'll talk more about fee structures. And then at City Hall, we've reduced maintenance budgets where we can for the facility itself and parking garages and parking lots. So that's a reduction to property management's budget, which you'll see in a moment. Rusty?
Most companies have gone away from self-funding healthcare. Have we looked at getting out of the healthcare business and going to an insurance company to handle that?
We're actually going to be looking at kind of trying to look at joining a bigger pool. So like the Tarrant County is tied with Dallas County, I think, in Collin County. Maybe talking to them about that bigger pool. What happens when you do that is you lose control some, right? And so, but we are going to be looking at those different options that are out there. We actually use Blue Cross Blue Shield. So, I mean, but it's just the city's, the city has a contract with Blue Cross Blue Shield to provide the funding. What we've noticed, and Deanna Giordano's here, who's kind of our expert on the HR side, is medical technology is becoming so good that it's saving people that are living a lot longer on very expensive medications and very expensive procedures, right? And when I say very expensive, we've had a record number of $1 million claims around surgeries, around health treatments in the last 2 or 3 years. That's really caused our costs to go up. And you're not going to tell an employee you need to just stop, right? So it is what it is, right? In the cost side of things. I think if you read the headlines, the city of Dallas is facing the same kind of issues. They actually dropped the PPO. They're only going with HMOs. I know there's a lot of folks that work there aren't happy about that. And so it's just the cost of healthcare where it's going. And so we're doing everything we can to try to moderate that. But we are going to be looking, it takes about a year to go to a different plan. But we are looking at investigating the potential to join bigger groups to spread the costs more.
All right, ready? General fund. So again, city's biggest operating fund, about a third of the total $3.3 billion budget. You'll see here, this is a financial summary, revenues on top, expenditures on the bottom, and that bottom row shows zero because we're balanced as required by state law. We've talked a little bit about property tax. Just as a reminder, property tax is the biggest source of revenue for the general fund. It's about 60%. And some people ask about the mix. And so of that 60%, we're looking at about 60% of that is residential. So when we talk about TAD's residential, reappraisal schedule and values, that's why there's an impact there. Sales tax is the other big portion of the general fund. So between property tax and sales tax, it's about 80%. We are seeing good growth in sales tax. We've had like double-digit growth after COVID, and we knew that that's like a temporary bump, but still projecting 5% growth. So that helps a little bit with the offsetting of the lower property tax values, but not quite as big. On the bottom is expenses by category, which isn't really the most helpful view, except to say that salary and benefits take up about 70% of the general fund, and a big portion of that is public safety, so sworn fire and police personnel. This, again, a lot of numbers here, and I'll show you a graph in a minute, but this is expenses by department in the general fund. So first column is the comparison to the current year. So fiscal year 26 adopted, the budget that we're in now, and then the recommended budget for next year. So about 4.6% growth, but you can see it hasn't quite looked like this in a budget that I've done, where the growth and then decreases are kind of all over the place. So I want to remind you of a couple things before I show you the graph. Our friends in communications made this to try to help explain the question of, like, why can't you find a budget gap in a $3.3 billion budget? So on the left-hand side, you have the total operating budget, 3.3, and the general fund, again, is about a third of that number. So on the left-hand side, you see the whole budget, but you have to remember that most of those funds are restricted to specific purposes. So we talked about the enterprise funds like water. We can't use water revenues to fund like a police or fire issue in the general fund. Same with aviation or solid waste. They're all like living in their own containers. So we get to the middle, which is the general fund. Pie chart here shows that public safety takes up about 57% of the general fund. And a lot of that, of course, is salary and benefits for police and fire. And so that leaves us in the right-hand side column, which is the rest of the general fund. So all the other departments in the general fund make up $413 million. And so when we were looking at an $80 million budget gap, right, really those reductions have to come from this right-hand side. We can't decrease police and fire and continue to invest in public safety and pay their contractually obligated pay increases. And so when you see when we talk about the milestones and the service level impacts, you're really talking about this right-hand side, which is why it's a really challenging budget situation. So here's that graph that I mentioned about decreases and increases for fiscal year 27's budget. So I'll go through just the top three and the bottom three if helpful. Fire is on top, $52.6 million is their growth in budget for next year. About $30 million of that is the EMS subsidy. So you all recall that the city merged with or took on MedStar EMS on July 1st of 2025. So this has been our first full budget year with that team integrated into the city. That is not a self-supporting function at this time. It's not its own enterprise fund. It's a special revenue fund. And we're seeing great results in response times and patient outcomes, which is what the goal was, but it does have a cost that general fund still subsidizes to the tune of $30 million. So of that 52, 30 is that. And then we have a placeholder in the budget for the fire labor agreement. That's under negotiations now. Some of you may be aware of that. So negotiations with the 440, which is like the fires union, placeholder there. And then I talked a little bit about adding to fire's budget for overtime and for fleet. So those are kind of the big rocks of fire's growth. Police's $26 million growth is almost all tied to their contract, their labor contract, so their scheduled raises. And then third category there is emergency management and communications. This is actually their first year to be like a full-fledged, there's a fly, department. And so they're taking on some IT costs and health costs that they didn't have last year. But also about half of that growth is the pilot that I mentioned. That's the assistive call taking technology with Axon 911. Bottom three, property management. I mentioned we were funding vehicle and equipment replacement funding in a different way. So it looks like a reduction to property management's budget, but it's really shifting those funds out of the general fund and onto the debt side of the budget. Economic development, that is all tied to that transfer that I mentioned where we're reducing the amount over to the Economic Development Initiatives Fund. That was a $4.5 million decrease. And then neighborhood services, that is all tied to the smoothing or sort of the way that we're funding that neighborhood improvement program, where we're doing the $1 million in year one and then bumping in year two. So those are the three. So not so much, and it looks a little crazy in numbers, but those are the strategies behind those reductions. And then you just have quite a few departments that are in the middle, reducing budgets or very flat. Say it again?
What is FWLAB?
Oh, that's my department, the Fort Worth Lab. Yes, that's budget, city's budget, revenue, and special districts like PIDS, also data analytics and organizational performance. Very, very flat. We have white coats. We are scientists. No, not really. We pretend. Yeah.
Where do you have the art that we have to have?
Public art. Yeah. Yeah, you won't see it represented here. Public art is budgeted in the capital projects through the bond program. She wants the mic back. She's dying to say yes.
Why can we not put that on a ballot? Because I know personally that money could be spent elsewhere. And actually, we have enough wealthy entrepreneurs in our community that could help pay for some of this artwork that maybe they're encouraging or whatever. I'd much rather see that money go back into either the fire department or the police. I know it's up there kind of high.
Can you turn on them? Oh, there it is. So, so the public art money that you're referencing couldn't go to police or fire. It is debt funds that are part of the capital program, and you actually voted on it when you voted on the bond program.
I did not vote for the bond.
Well, so our citizens voted and passed it.
Okay.
So it's part of the bond program, and it's capital dollars. So it can only be spent for capital, can't go to operations. And so it can't be used for police or fire or anybody.
But there are other things in the capital budget that you could put that money towards.
Yes, you're right. It could be, the city council has a policy of the 1% and that goes to art with the project, the bonds. And unless that gets changed, that's how our bonds go forward. So the city council could change the policy and eliminate the 1%. Then that 1% would go toward the project, toward capital projects and not toward art.
Okay.
We have one more public art question.
So when you have a piece of art in a median and it gets hit by a car or in a roundabout and it gets destroyed, what budget does it come out of to repair that? Because I'm assuming it's not bond money. So then is that stuff that we're not going to be, are we making cuts in that area or what happens there?
So I believe we have insurance on it, so we have an actual risk fund that would cover those costs. And then of course, if a car hits it, we try to go and subrogate the person that did that, that did the. So does insurance cover 100%? No, the city has a risk fund that you have to pay deductibles and all that's part on the broader self-insured large city like we have. And so which budget is it? It is, so you have allocations like fleet, for instance. So every department has an allocation for risk on an annual basis. It's a little sliver that builds up our risk fund to make sure to cover any lawsuits, insurance, all those kind of things.
So then the art would come out of which?
Out of risk, that's part of the overall risk side.
You won't see it.
Has the city had discussion about reevaluating where we currently are with our fine fee structure? And if we have, are we at a level that is comparable to other large cities? And what are we, sorry, what's part one? And then part two is what are we doing to recapture any fines?
So sure. So actually on an annual basis, all the departments go through and review all our fines and fees across the city to determine whether or not we're keeping up with, on a market basis, with what other cities are, whether or not we're, we had a fee, we had a lower because we actually got higher than the state let us have a fee, for instance. But so there's a 171-page document that we sent to the city council last week, and they're like, this is not what we asked for, but it was the review of every fine and fee, and I think we had about, how many fees were in there? Yeah, it was over 1,000 fees, and there's about 49 of them that actually were going down. All the rest are going up to either be comparable in the market. whether that's fines. One of them that did get presented to the city council, for instance, like when you get your car booted, that fee hadn't been changed since 2008 or something. So that one's going up to the max that you can do it under state law. That's just an example, but we do look at them every year. Well,
Retrieving the fines,
yeah, they have to pay. They have to pay their fines.
right?
So if they don't pay, for instance, on a code situation, we put a lien on the property. So then they have a lien on the property. If they sell the property, then we get paid before the money goes out to the seller. So
And is that giving through the time that, I know that has to go through the legal process to provide certified notification and opportunity for the resident to abate the issue?
Right.
But how long of a process before we actually step in and collect those funds and add it to?
Well, we can't collect them until we go through all those processes, and it depends on the process, right? And so there's so many different fines. If you can give me an example, I can get an expert. There's just so many. One might be a week, another one might be 2 years, right? It just depends on what the fine is and what the issue is.
Jay, for a number of years, I've been talking with parks about public-private work, trying to help get money from public-private, actually from private situations to help pay for some of our recreation. I would like to point out that the Betty Price Community Center has proven that the Parks Department knows how to run these programs. Why can't we get some of these businesses around to lend their names and some money to these park efforts that we're now having to back off on?
I mean, I think it's something that I believe Dave and his team try to get folks involved to do that.
And
So
we haven't seen anything.
like, I guess what is the Betsy Price doing that's different from the others?
Well, it's just that they're fully committed in all of their programs, but yet the city has its name on Betsy Price,
Right.
but it has no corporation associated with it.
Oh, you mean selling like the naming rights to the buildings? Okay, I didn't understand what you were saying. I thought you were saying getting private sector to do the programs. That's what I thought you were.
To some of our independent work, we're spending $30 million on to rebuild one of the community centers, and we could make that 35 if we could get.
Well, I know we're looking at doing a naming rights for the convention center. It could be something that we could start looking for community centers. In the past, it's not been something that the city council or citizens wanted, is the corporatization of the neighborhood community centers, but it could work. Oh, I understand, and that's why we're not getting rid of any of them. That was one of the goals in the budget. But I understand what you're saying. It's certainly something we can look at.
I had a question as far as getting back to the arts. How do they get a special carve out, get in with the bond issue? That is, these departments have to put in a wish list, but the arts, they get a special carve out. That, how do you go about getting a special carve out?
So the city council passed a policy in 2001, I think it is, that says that in an attempt to provide more art and make the city more beautiful and more attractive, that all of our bond projects that have to do with streets, 1% of that overall bond program would go toward art projects. And in the rest of them, in parks and facilities, it's 2%. So this last $840 million bond program, we had about $12 million that is set aside for art projects related to all those projects that were passed.
As far as who oversees that and dictates what art is or is not, it's kind of subjective.
So there's a whole program and process that works behind that. That we work. For instance, if you're having one of the projects is a street and intersection that's being redone, The neighborhoods in that area will be asked to come together. They'll put a committee together, what kind of art project should it be. Then you have artists that will actually submit responses to an RFP for what they would potentially create as art. The committee ends up picking that, and then the council approves that, and that's how it gets funded. So there's a whole process behind it.
Kind of reminds me of gambling. The bookie never loses, so the arts never loses.
Well, I mean, if you can get the city council wants to get rid of the policy, we would get rid of the policy. That's. Yeah, and I hear you. You all don't want the art. You don't want to spend money on art. But I'm saying, the majority of the council, right? Well, it is transparent when we go through the bond program. Yes, sir.
Question for you, ma'am. You've spoken in this presentation and in the letter to the council by the city manager, how the devaluation of our property values has played a big part in the shortfall that we're experiencing in Fort Worth. Can you talk to what the contribution factor is for high-rise multifamily apartment complexes and also warehouses, of which there are numerous in North Fort Worth, if anybody needs to go look? Can you talk to what that valuation
Sure.
and that contribution is?
Sure. So, on the apartment side, for whatever reason, that also devalued by TAD. It didn't happen in Dallas County, and it didn't happen in Collin County, but that went down overall about 4.5%, 5%. On the commercial side, it actually went up, but the commercial side for everything else, stores, warehouses, manufacturing programs, plants, and all that, the city's tax base is about 55% single family residential, about 8% or so multifamily, and then the other remainder is commercial and industrial. Commercial, we added in, and so we're growing, we're the fastest growing large city in the country. Y'all see it, feel it. We added almost $2 billion in new value last year. The appraisals of the existing properties, both single family and multifamily, took that off the books. We lost 1.89 billion. So we gained just a little bit, 100 million. In a large city like us, 100 million growth is nothing. So we've actually made incredible progress in flipping. We used to be more, instead of it being at 63% when you take residential, the full residential, which is multifamily and single family, we used to be more like 68%. So we've lowered that in the last 15 years, about 5%, because you want higher, more and more commercial, because it subsidizes the rest, all of us that pay taxes on the residential side. So that's one of the goals overall on the economic development side, is to bring in more larger warehouses, and not warehouses necessarily. Warehouses are here because where we're located with 20, I-20, I-30, I-35, but the manufacturing, the high tech, the high value, the back office insurance and white collar kind of work, that's the kind of things we want to bring to the city so that those values are high and it can lessen the burden on the residents. Yes, ma'am.
Being here this evening, I have several questions. One, the Code Ranger program, as I understand it, is predominantly volunteers. I don't know how many paid employees are involved with that, but there is a system involved. I don't understand why that would have been cut when it provides a valuable service.
My code director is here. He can answer that question.
Good, because I have another question regarding code. How much does code compliance generate in revenue for the city? I look at my neighborhood and I look and see, that's a repeat offender, that's a repeat offender, that's a repeat offender. And that could be generating revenue for at least one salary for a code officer. That's my second question. My third is regarding the CCPD fund. A certain percentage of that money goes to nonprofits. with no accountability to the nonprofits. When that program was resold to the public a few years ago, it was sold as money that was going to go to police officers. Some of it does, but a percentage of it does not. The money that's going to the nonprofits could also go to fund police officers' salaries and equipment. So I don't understand, as a concerned resident here, why that money is diverted from where the original intent was, which, when again it was originally sold, was to go directly to support police officers, their equipment, vehicles, et cetera. So there are three questions I would really appreciate an answer, because all of that impacts the bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I can do the first two. The third one, I'll kick back to somebody else. The Code Ranger program, a big part of that we haven't really discussed is it only took 1 to 1.5 positions that were assisting with facilitating it. The bigger issue was we got too good. The app is so efficient, people stopped taking the training classes and people stopped going through the protocols. And so what happened is the app usage went through the roof, but the program itself just slowly subsided to where we're canceling classes all the time. We have no one to teach on it. And then, like our city manager had touched on before, they go in, get their training, they go after, it's really like a street in their neighborhood, and it gets cleaned up, which to the credit of the program, it's working, but the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, essentially. It was everyone has shifted to the app, so that was why that shifted away. On our revenue, the main revenue that we have is from our multifamily inspection program. What you're referencing, and I'm glad you brought it up, is when we go out to a property and it's full of trash or junk vehicles, and we're like, oh, you're gonna get citations for this. Just like a speeding ticket with police, they're all of ours, not all the police, are Class C misdemeanors, and the city gets a fraction of that. Most of it goes to the state and the county. It's not really a source of revenue. However, we are starting a civil citation program where the city controls that, and it's an administrative fine, and all of that money is going to go into actually a building rehabilitation fund, so people in the neighborhood that are struggling from that can apply to use it to put towards correcting their code violation and improving the issues. But when we say have to mow a property, we're stuck by state guidelines, and we have like an administrative fee that we throw on there. But they will typically get billed from 30 or 60 days, and after they don't, it gets liened on the property. And then the city only gets that revenue when the property is sold and we get the lien back. But it is something we actively look at.
So then let me ask a follow-up question to that. If you're putting liens on property owners, how does that work when a neighborhood is predominantly a rental residential single-family home neighborhood? Because the renters then will leave and the owners are not taxed or fined because the water bill is usually in the name of the renter.
Correct. In the situation where if it's a citation we're writing, they're still getting the citations. However, you're correct. If it's an out-of-state owner, that's really not a very good tool that we have, but we're still going to go through the motions because in case they come back by here and it goes to a warrant, they will have wished that they mowed their lawn.
It's not just about mowing the lawn, for example. What the violations that I'm speaking of are people using the curb and the sidewalks for dumping their belongings that sit there all month long, and nothing gets done, even with reporting them on the app, because in reporting on the app, the common response from the app is no violation observed when it's there.
There's different procedures when it comes to out-of-cycle bulk pickup and whatnot, and I that's a little bit different of an issue, but I know what you're saying. But no, that we still issue citations to the tenants when they are tenant-created problems. It's not always the owner. In that situation, the owner unlikely flew into town, went in there and put a bunch of junk at the curb. So we do write citations to the tenants as well. It's when we don't get resolution from the tenants that we then escalate it to the owner. But I understand what you're saying, but no, that's enforcement is still being taken. Now, when it comes to a lien, if they're out of state, until they sell that property, which I know you're probably thinking the same stuff I am, and sometimes they've owned this property for 30 or 40 years. Unless they sell it, we wouldn't get that in return. But I get what you're saying. But there was the CCPD question still.
Yes. So yes, the CCPD has a policy that was really created by the board, which is the council, that allows for a portion of the funds to be applications from nonprofits that provide some activity or some work that's supposed to be toward crime prevention or reduction, the work that they're doing. And so that's been since day one of the program, because I was actually, I'm so old, I was the budget analyst that did the original budget and did the original presentations with Chief Wyndham on this side and Chuck Silcox on this side on a for and against for the vote back in 1994, going to all the council meetings, like council districts like this. But as that sales tax has grown, the amount of the budget available for that is a bigger number. So I'm going to ask Chief Garcia to come up. As you know, Chief's new, and we're actually going through this process this year with him, where one of the questions that some council members are asking is exactly that, of how much money is going toward. Are these programs that have been around for a while really part of the crime plan that the chief has brought and where we're going? And so he's going to be going through a process here in this year to evaluate all those things. So I'll let the chief talk about it.
No, like the boss said, and I love getting these questions, quite frankly, because one of the things when you look at the goals of CCPD, it's prevention of crime, reduction of crime, and then increasing public safety. There's not a criminologist in the country that's going to tell you there are all social services and social programs that can help reduce crime and violent crime in the city. Most of our money in CCPD does go to exactly what you want, right? With police, equipment, training. Every single recruit in the academy that we have, that money comes from the CCPD budget, not from the general fund. It doesn't go into the general fund until they graduate from the academy. So I will tell you this, thank you for CCPD, because I will tell you this, it's one of the things and one of the outliers, and I've been to a few places, and I'll tell you, it's one of the things that makes Fort Worth special. And it was one of the things that attracts recruits here to know the investments that the city makes in its law enforcement. But what I will tell you is one of the things, as the boss mentioned, is we're going to be looking at the programs that we have through a criminological lens. You know, quite frankly, what programs are nice to have and what programs have literature that criminologists know that these programs work nationally to reduce crime, right? And so that's a step that we're going to be taking this year that is new, that we're going to be looking at criminologists and experts of criminology that'll tell us what programs are nice and what programs actually have been shown to have a direct effect on the reduction of crime and to ensure that the goals of CCPD are met. And so I don't think that's something that's been done before. We've been trying to do that, and we're doing it this time because we do have to be very good stewards of CCPD. We know the investment this community makes. We know that that's what makes Fort Worth different and what makes Fort Worth special. And so we want to do that, and we're going to be looking at that without anything in mind other than what does data say? What programs work, what programs don't? And that's the exercise that we'll be doing moving forward.
Thank you.
Is that going to be for
I
me?
have submitted.
Yes, it's going to be for you.
Oh, sorry. I have submitted on my own behalf, and I know I've seen you a couple times before, for CCPD. I've asked in writing for what are the groups that this money's going to, how much is going, and what proof do you have that that money is actually going where it's supposed to and not into somebody's pocket? And I have asked at least 4 different times to get this information, and I've been ignored. I've asked to be added to a group that investigates that if they will start such an investigation. I've asked to be a part of it, and I'm still getting no answers.
I have an answer for her.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a list from 2025 that was given to me by Bethany Warner from last year when Jay did a budget meeting, and I asked for a list of all the places that the city of Fort Worth gives money to nonprofits. And in 2025, out of the CCPD budget, it was $11 million that went to nonprofits. And some of the ones listed here are Kelvin's Kindness, Literacy United, Journey Forward.
27,000, 30,000.
Well, it's 11 million overall, but I do have the list here, and you're welcome to look at it. But my question is too,
I know I was told last year when I asked about this, it was Deputy Chief Aldridge who said that's a small portion. 11 million's not much. When we're dealing with a budget shortfall, that's a lot. And also, if it's not, like you said, if it's not reducing crime, it's not a proven thing, then we need to take it and use it because everybody's concerned about safety.
100% agree. I can't speak to things. I mean, this is what we're going to now. In addition to that, working with the criminologists also, at the end of the day, the metrics that we're using to decide success and failure of these programs, right, is what you said, what you delivered, right? We're giving a lot of money. $11 million is a lot of money. But it's very necessary if we have these programs that work. And so we're going to be also working at what metrics are we using for success and failure of these programs, so that at the end of the year, when we reevaluate, did we get our return on investment, which is something that we're going to be utilizing the experts to identify as well.
I think when it was passed, the CCPD and the bond, most people don't know that that's going to go to nonprofits. Some of them are after-school care to keep kids out of trouble and stuff, and that's not what they were envisioning, because they see on the back of the police cars CCPD funded, and we think that it's going directly to the police department to do that. And a lot of these programs are social programs, which are nice, but that should be a different world. That should be nonprofits that are funded by citizens, standalone funding, that citizens will support it because it works, because I doubt if some of these are still on here for this year. Do you know how much money is going to go this year to nonprofits from the CCPD fund?
I don't know exactly, but I will tell you it's around that same amount.
Yeah, I'm not
I talked
happy
to
with
my
that.
budget analyst. It's around that same amount. I'll say this: when you look at crime reduction, right? And I've been doing this job for a long time. We also need social services to fill in some gaps, and there's not an expert of criminology that's going to tell you different. That law enforcement does need that assistance. Now the question is what we're using to fill those gaps, have they been shown to work? Are we judging them? Is what they promised they were going to deliver, they're delivering? Now that's a fact. And I'll say this: I've been in a lot of places where this type of funding doesn't exist, and you end up running around trying to get handouts to get these programs started that are absolutely necessary. And so here, with what we have here, is not that area where we're running around scrounging and trying to get handouts to do this, but at the same time, we need to ensure that these programs work. And at the same time, we need to ensure that individuals that are experts in criminology, that have studied these programs nationally, that can tell us what works, what doesn't, and how are we going to grade them in order for them to get funded.
It'd be nice too if it's more transparent, meaning CCPD, a lot more transparency with that, because again, CCPD, how many people knew that it went to Kelvin's? I mean, there's a whole list of these things, and they give the dollar amounts. Just more transparency, because we had to dig for this, and she got to run around and
Understood.
whatnot. Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
I've been asking 26 and now 27, nobody will answer. So how is that transparent? How do we know that it's actually going where it's supposed to? And if the police budget is getting cut,
It's not getting cut.
the police department is overseeing where is this money going to that's supposed to be going to CCPD?
The police budget's not getting cut.
I was just going to say the police
The police budget's not getting cut.
Isn't getting cut. I mean, I will
The
tell
fire
you this,
department nor the police department are getting cut. They're not getting cut.
We're not. I can tell you we're not getting. In fact, as we said, we're trying to grow the police department, which is something that we're very thankful
Chief,
for.
so my name's Scott Graham, and I was appointed by Charlie to be on the board that oversees the money you all are talking about. So I serve on the board as an alternate, and we've already been told this year by, I think his name is LT, who works with you in the police department, as a consultant, that the police department is looking at everything that money's going to in the Emerging Partners Program. Every dollar's being looked at, every organization's being looked at. As board members, we're looking at everything that's being spent, and is it in alignment with the chief and what he's trying to accomplish. So maybe that information was hard to get, but it is out there because I'm on the board and I represent you guys. And I think we're doing it's a lot of work, a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. But I think that whenever we have a board meeting over this money, the police department is there in the meeting. And I know Keith Morris is working and overseeing that. So Charlie put me on that. And thanks, Charlie. It's more work than I thought.
And I'll check, but all that, the budget and the detail in the budget should be available online, but I'll double check with our police department folks to make sure that it's easier to find. So it should be available within the budget page. Question.
Okay. So I noticed that I have this list here of money that goes out to nonprofits, and one of the biggest ones, and a lot of it comes from the general fund, is for solving, or not solving, but reducing homelessness. Mm-hmm. And you have 40 plus partners, and the money goes to you guys, then you give it to Partnership Home, who gives it to a whole bunch of little nonprofits. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of nonprofits getting a lot of money, and the homelessness rate has gone up, 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 up. So we're paying for reducing it, and the solution they're using, permanent supportive housing, which is what they've been using for a long time now, has not worked. And they always say every year, because I watch the state of homelessness every year that they do, it's always, if we just had more money, if we just had more money, we could do this. And their budgets keep going up, and there's no holding them accountable for the results of that. I'd like to see, this is all money that's being spent and spending on nonprofits that are not accountable for reducing it.
So across the country, homelessness is up everywhere.
It is.
And so it's not just in Fort Worth. And I think if you had less of these, this is just my opinion. I've been working on it a long time.
I don't think this is coming through. Is it? Okay. Ma'am, all these social services that you're upset about, that's what reduces crime. That's what reduces crime. And if you don't provide after-school care for kids, they're going to get in trouble.
That's
okay. That's all nonprofits. If they're going to get money, they have to report to the people.
Right now, Secretary Treasurer is starting a Doge or whatever, and he is going to scrutinize every social committee that is giving money out.
Yeah.
So we have got to, as a city, we need to scrutinize these social services to make sure that the money is going to help this homeless person to go to after school.
I would just ask some of y'all, go volunteer at some of these places before you start criticizing them. Yeah. Go volunteer. Find out what's really going on.
So a lot of great points being made, but what I want to do is I want to get this train back on the rails real quick. What I think we do need to do, and I'm going to ask for city staff help on this, is setting up a meeting where it's just going to be like really a sales tax specific meeting with CCPD and Trinity Metro, because I could talk about that for about an hour, and I know you guys can talk about it too. But we won't do that tonight because I want to make sure we stay on topic with the general fund budget, since we have so much there, because I know we still have a lot of slides to get through. So, well, not a lot. It's a lot. She's done this a few times. So we're gonna finish this one, or finish the slides, and then I've been taking some notes. I want to just do a few wave tops, and then definitely sounds like we need to have another follow up on like really going down the rabbit hole on some of these other issues. So back to you.
Back to me. Okay. You've looked at that one for long enough, right? We're good? Okay, so we're going to move off general fund for just a moment to finish up. Enterprise funds, I mentioned, not taxpayer funded, funded by user fees and rates. So this is a summary of the city's enterprise funds. 5, the biggest is water. So you see water there, about 8.7% growth in their budget. That's not rate growth, but budget growth, investing in operating and maintenance as well as big capital projects, as I mentioned. Solid waste, second biggest. Their budget growth is driven by collection costs from waste management, long-term landfill planning. We have the stormwater utility. They're represented here at a table back there, Jennifer. Stormwater utility is also an enterprise fund. You see that fee on your water bill. And they are continuing planned increases so that they can continue to do mid-sized flood mitigation projects, channel inspections, other efforts that are involved with that life-saving work of stormwater and flood management. And then we have 2 municipal funds there, airports and parking. So airports are the 3 municipal airports, Spinks, Profield, which one am I missing? Meacham. And their budget looks like it's growing quite a bit. That's actually because aviation is able to help relieve the general fund by reimbursing it for the 2 fire stations that are associated with the airports. So that's actually like an FAA eligible cost for this particular enterprise fund. So that helps the general fund a bit. And then parking is the city-owned parking garages, lots, meters, okay? Oh my gosh, you know what? I was trying to get through this.
Okay, when are we going to go back to free parking downtown? That needs to come now.
Just...
We're broke, we need the money.
I like that we're asking a question that is just a hot button, aren't we? Jay, do you want to talk about downtown parking? Free parking. Yeah, free parking.
Free parking is only available on the curbs after 5 and on the weekends.
It's like we're not answering that.
Well, the garages are privately owned. Yeah. It used to be free because the owners of the garages allowed them to be free.
Yes.
They stopped doing that in 2020.
Yep.
So that's why they're no longer free. They were private garages that were free.
So these are city-owned garages, okay? Not the private ones. Good question, though. Special revenue funds, we've talked a little bit about CCPD. Their budget growth mirrors our sales tax growth because, again, that's their primary revenue source. They are adding a couple of school resource officers in next year's budget. Public events is the group of funds that's like culture and tourism. So their dedicated revenue source is hotel occupancy tax. And some of their budget looks a little bit funny. It reflects the transition out of Will Rogers Memorial Complex management, and also next year the convention center is a little bit offline due to its expansion. So some of the revenue is down for next year just because people won't be able to reserve for conferences and that kind of thing during that expansion. Other big one here is EMS, newest special revenue fund. I mentioned MedStar. And they're growing quite a bit as well, 16.4%. That includes that $30 million subsidy from general fund that we talked about. And they also support, there's fleet cost in there. There's some like legal and finance billing support. So not just fire, but primarily fire EMS there. Environmental is another fee that you see on your water bill. It's going up by 1/4 a month. That funds litter abatement, street sweeping, camp cleanup, right? Municipal golf, again, not taxpayer funded, but funded by the golfers. Those are the city golf courses. They've seen some more usage, so they're adding some food and beverage staff, some maintenance staff, and then we do have a small special revenue fund there for community tree planting. Their budget looks like a reduction because they bought a vehicle or a piece of equipment this year, so it just falls off for next year. We've talked a little bit about fee increases in response to a question, but I'll just reiterate here that we look at these annually alongside the budget, and council adopts a fee ordinance with the budget. And so if you are interested in the detail, it's out there on the website. It is very long, but I'll go through kind of the main fees that you typically see, fees and rates. So remember, hearkening back to the beginning about property values, as property values decrease, even as we increase the tax rate, if we should so choose to do that via council's vote, your average tax bill at an average taxable value still drops a slight amount for fiscal year 27. You can see it in the top. As average home taxable value, here, I'll show you here. As average home vaxable value, that's what I said, vaxable value. You got that, right? Yeah, good. You know what I mean. As average taxable value drops, and then you see the tax rate in the middle section up by 3.2 cents. You see that slight decrease in the city portion of the annual tax bill, because remember, it's not just the city that you pay, it's also the school district and the county and that kind of thing. So if that bill, you're like, that's not what my bill is, that's the city's portion of an average taxable value. I'll go back here. So stacking here are the rates and fees that you see on your water bill. So we talked about stormwater, water and wastewater there, solid waste and environmental as a group on a monthly basis, increasing $7.09 based on typical usage. We also update the capital program during the budget. So this is just a snapshot of that rolling 5-year plan. So when you hear the budget expressed in terms of $4 billion, it's because it includes the capital. So for fiscal year 27, we're looking at a $1 billion capital plan, the majority of that in water. I'm going at rapid speed now. Do you see this? We talked a little bit about PAYGO. This is the portion of the budget that's tied to the 7.25 cent portion of the tax rate. So seeing a slight reduction here because we've left that value static. So again, values drop, static rate, less money. But transportation and public works is flat, slightly growing. Parks, flat. The big reduction you'll see is in neighborhood services. And for like the third or fourth time, that's that smoothing of the neighborhood improvement program, year one spend at $1 million. Total budget, $4.35 billion for next year, down slightly from the current year. You have obviously seen the community engagement schedule, and I'm proud of you for that because you're here. We have a couple more of these to go. I think this is 7 of 10. You can also watch any of them back using the city's YouTube channel. We're seeing like 250 to 350 people streaming each one, which is great. I pretend it's just you guys so that I don't like freak out at the camera. But there's lots of good content out there. Jay mentioned we have a budget public hearing on September 1st. That's just another touch point for you if you would like to talk to all of the council members at once instead of just your council member that's here. You can certainly attend that at 2 o'clock on Tuesday. And the council at this stage, based on the state required timeline, is adopting the budget and the tax rate on September 15th. So still some time to engage. And feel free to scan these QR codes on the left-hand side. Lots of resources on Connect Fort Worth, which is all things like city engagement. The budget is the star of the show right now on that page. And then on the right-hand side is the Fort Worth Labs budget page. You can watch every budget work session back to April. You can see every written response we've done to council, including the fee ordinance and some other things. Your council members asked questions that we've responded to in writing. We'll have a few more coming. So feel free to scan those, and we appreciate the questions and engagement. I'm going to turn it back over there.
And if you do want to attend on Tuesday and you want to talk, make sure you sign up before online in the cities so that you will be listed as a speaker. He has a question back there.
Did the council direct there be no furlough days or layoffs in this budget?
I ended up putting together the budget without any furloughs or layoffs. If the council wanted us not to increase the tax rate where it was, that's the next thing on the list.
Thank you.
I know that Councilman Larsdorf brought up at one of the budget meetings that this is just as an example he brought up that windshield wipers for a police cruiser, it costs almost $240 to replace that windshield wiper. So I know that it's too late now. The windshield wiper was like $16 and labor was like, the other part of it. Do you have any plans for, in the future, maybe going through and auditing some things to see if there's more of that type of things that can be, cut out?
Yeah, so I think we went back and looked at it. There was an oddity in the way that billing system, it was a billing system error. It doesn't cost $240 to replace the windshield wiper. But that kind of review happens all the time. Whenever we've had things that come up that don't make sense, we have an audit department. We'll ask the internal auditor to go through and see if there's any fraud or anything like that going on, right? And then part of her group is performance. So we have folks that go into the departments that will go through and utilize like green belt, black belt processes to eliminate costs, and or figure out how you can use technology to reduce costs. So those things are ongoing constantly. Councilman, you want to?
All right, so I have a few notes that I want to make sure we cover because I think it's important. A lot of great information, obviously a lot of information, which we will get a copy of the PowerPoint. If you're, again, not already signed up for our newsletter, please do, so that way we can get you all this information. But let either myself or Booker or Michael know, and we can make sure you get a copy of it. I want to talk about the pavement maintenance fee for a second, because there's a lot of bad information going around about that. I actually do support that, and here's why. Anytime your roads get to the point where they have to be completely redone or they're in terrible shape, usually it has to go to a bond to get repaired. And for every lane mile, it's about $1 million. Am I right, Lauren? Look at Lauren, $2 million. Okay, costs have gone up. So that's our director of TPW. So she's the smart one. We do not want our roads in North Fort Worth to get to the point to where they have to go through that, because then it's going to take forever for it to get done. The pavement maintenance fee is really to make, and I'm going to take what Lauren said, I'm going to make it Marine style, to make good roads gooder. All right. So before it gets to the point where they need to be repaired, that maintenance fee is going to go help maintain those roads so they don't continually get deteriorated to the point where we're having to like dip and dodge all these potholes. So that's the reason why I support it. There's a lot of information going around, people saying, well, we're going to pay this fee up here and it's going to go to all these other roads throughout the city of Fort Worth. Honestly, a lot of them are going to go to our roads. Because if you were to look at the road network in North Fort Worth, a lot of our roads are green and some of them are yellow. Those fees are going to go to those roads, not the roads that are red that are in other parts of the city. So I just want to clear that. Lauren, did I sum that up correctly? Okay, perfect. So that's why I support it. And I have to pay these fees too. I don't get any special discount. And so I'm okay with my money going to that. So I do support that, but I certainly want to hear y'all's feedback on that as well. Public art, we brought that one up. I've talked about it at council before. Whatever happened in 21, I think I was still in high school in 21. Hey, okay, all right. We got a bunch of jokesters here. That's rude, all right, rude. Maybe I was a couple years off. Yeah, I actually was deployed in 2021, so yes. I've asked staff to help us go back there, to go back to that, reevaluate that, to where we really can take that back to the voters, to where they can make the determination on if that's specifically what they want money to go to. Because I made it quite clear where I stand on that one. The fines and fees, I've also asked to absolutely hammer some of these nuisance properties. Unfortunately, there's these state laws that say we can't charge a certain amount. And so I've already asked code, whatever we could do, especially the commercial nuisance, go as high as we possibly can, because I think nothing's going to change until we hit them in the pocket. So I am on top of that one as well. List of every organization, CCPD, a lot of this, I'm going to take the hit on for failing to communicate better with y'all. And so you have my word that I'm going to improve that communication, not just on the high level stuff, but everything that we're doing. So whenever we have our CCPD board meetings, anything, our office will get that information out so you know exactly what happened during that meeting. It's all public knowledge, it's all public data, but again, if you have to search that hard to find it, we can do better. So we will do better for you. Speaking of council, please do sign up to come speak. I mean, it's open mic night and we get the same people every single time that come up there with the same, we're live. We have the same people coming down every single time, and they feel that they are the only voice and that they represent the entire city of Vermilion, and they, in fact, do not. Unfortunately, we never have any District 4 residents come out to speak, and so when you have the loudest that are chirping and hollering, it would probably make you all pull out your hair, those that still have hair. Yeah, see, that's right, back at you for making fun of me. So I encourage you, please do come down and speak. Speak your mind, please. If you don't know how, we will gladly help walk you through that process of signing up, but we want to hear from you, and we need to hear from you. Because unfortunately, like I said, just a one-sided voice. And I tell people it's because our residents are busy working because they have jobs. Windshield wiper, I just want to touch on that real quick. That's this internal fund thing that I think we really need to figure out, because what's happening is if you cook dinner for your husband, then you charge him $50. Well, it's still staying all in the same pockets, but now you're giving him $50, but then he turns around, changes your oil, and he charges you $50 for it. It goes back to him. There's just a lot that needs to happen there because the departments are paying for things out of their funds. it's not coming necessarily out of your pockets. It's just the way it's being done that we really need to take a look at. So that's my soapbox. Does anybody have any budget questions for me or any compliments? Madam.
Okay, thanks. The road fee.
Yes.
Okay, I know that Austin started out with like a $2 to $3 road fee. They're now up to $25. And we don't get, that's a council thing. It's not something that comes that we can vote on. So my concern is in the future. You guys can raise it anytime you want. And you may be a great guy who's in office, but who knows what we'll get in the future?
Oh, yeah.
And who knows what kind of budget problems we'll be into. And it's something that we don't have control over once you guys, you guys get to decide. Just kind of like the arts thing, you get to decide if we vote on it or not.
Absolutely, and I can almost guarantee anyone who comes after me is going to be better, so you're good there. But to that point, the way I look at it, I kind of do like this cup of coffee test. If it's something that's going to be, a cup of coffee or a cold drink, I think that's more palatable. But now whenever you start talking about $20, $25 fees, $30 fees, what else could I get for that $30 that's more important than that? And is it actually going to what they say it's going to go to and improve my quality of life? Because I'm going to be selfish in that regard. I mean, I do believe high tide lifts all boats, but sometimes I want to be selfish with my money. So if it were me, if I was still on the board where the council where it goes from $5 and one, I don't think Lauren and her team would ever get to the point where they're having to come out and say, I need $25. But if they did, like a great poet once said, it's a no for me, dog. So not going to happen. Right. And so hopefully whoever at that point, if it did, because that wouldn't happen overnight, that's going to happen over many years. Hopefully whoever we elect to represent us would not support that. So any other questions? Trucks on the roads.
We talked to you about this.
Oh, I know sand shell. I'm just saying, I'm trying to relate it to.
We're talking about, we're going to pay fees, but then you've
right.
got all these big semi trucks driving on the roads around.
So maybe can you remind me what the companies are paying as far, or maybe Lauren, that might be for you, that what the companies are paying, the corporations? There we are. Perfect.
Hi. So yes, the great thing about having the fee as the mechanism that funds this is that we are asking the businesses to pay their proportional share of what they do to our streets. So the rates will vary for the different businesses according to how that land use, how that business uses the streets. And so industrial property that generates a high number of trips per day, and they're usually long trips, will have a higher cost, higher monthly charge than a doctor's office or that kind of use.
So what about the schools with the school buses?
They also use the streets, so they will pay their proportional share. All this traffic generation information is industry standard methodology that is applied in all the cities that have this type of street fee.
Okay. Oh, yes, our favorite topic.
One more thing. With Austin, theirs is different. They use their fee to cover all of their street activities, not just maintenance, and they don't have any other funding sources contributing to it. Whereas our fee is intended to be a supplemental fee to our existing maintenance funding. So that's why, we aren't going to be trying to have a really large fee that will replace the funding that we already have. There was another point to the Austin comment as well. Yeah, we don't often hear ourselves compared to Austin, and I like to try to counter those arguments wherever I can.
So real quick, just to tie in the Trinity Metro into the street fee, to tie into the budget, I've asked city staff to do a feasibility study on clawing back some of that sales tax revenue from Trinity Metro, sort of what Dallas did. And again, I don't want to compare ourselves to Dallas, but even a broken clock is right twice a day. But I want to try to claw back some of that money from Trinity Metro to help pay for the roads that they're also damaging. Because at one point they did, contribute to that street maintenance. But then at some point they stopped, and it's time to get that back. And I told them I'd trade Route 16 for it. But so.
So you're saying the schools would have the fee, but not both government entities, schools and Metro.
Yeah. Right, I'm just trying to claw back millions more, though, not just a little bit. So.
I mean, we would get $7 or whatever from them, or whatever it is.
Well, theirs would be a lot higher because their usage. Sir.
Okay, two things then. On the Trinity Metro, if you can also ask them to go ahead and give free rides to all of the ISDs and not just Fort Worth ISD. I know the traffic pattern isn't up here, but I don't think that's fair at all, that only one ISD. I know Fort Worth makes up the majority of their traffic pattern. That's great. But hey, what about the kids up here? If they could have free passes too, that would be maybe encouraging for them to do something on the weekend or something like that. So that's one. The second thing is, I didn't see anything on impact fees. I know it's not so much District 4 because it's really grown down, but impact fees are pretty important, especially where we see District 10 and a lot of the places that we went with Alicia. There is a big need for major infrastructures outside of the other areas, and we don't want Bonds Ranch Road and things like that to keep taking decades.
So impact fees are primarily for infrastructure, and so they're in those capital funds, and they are applied on roads and on. I think right now we're at 68% of what we can charge, which is the highest it's ever been. And there's a fly. It can go up, but again, it's a policy decision, and at some point, if you want development to continue, if you price yourself by your market, that doesn't happen. I'm not saying that we're there yet, but that's one of the questions.
Those are coming again in front of council, I think, next year.
Yes, we look at them every 5 years. So every 5 years, you look at it and then see what new roads would qualify to have impact fees if they come forward, and then the amount that gets applied to them.
Okay, sir.
I want to ask a specific question about CCPD. So if we're doing all of this evaluation and figuring out what's really worth it and what's really not, can we get a deadline set and have, by that deadline, something published for every?
I'm sure we can. I mean, I can work with Chief Garcia, and what I don't want to establish any, I want to make sure we do it right. And with the criminologist that he's bringing on board to actually look, that's data-driven and not emotion-driven, I want to make sure that criminologist has the data they need, and our police department has the data they need. And quite frankly, even on the CCPD board, whenever we approve these things, looking at it really with the microphone, or not microphone, a magnifying glass, really going through it. So
yeah, I don't want you to rush it, but I don't want it to just fall through the crack and be ignored completely.
Well, for one thing, we start our budget process in April. So if we're going to make changes for the budget for next year, we would need to know where we're going with that by the time we get to April. So that's part of the overall timeline.
I just have one quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
The issue has come up about the remote call-in to city council during city council meetings. Is the city reviewing that again so that people who cannot get downtown can actually participate in the civic process via either WebEx or Zoom or whatever y'all used to use?
So I'm not sure if the city has, but I'll get with staff and see if anyone's brought that up. Because I know one of the issues with doing that is the anonymity, and we see all the keyboard warriors out there, and the culture of anonymous. And so, but it's certainly a valid point, and those who can't make it down there certainly understand. But yeah, I'll go, and I can certainly ask staff and see if that's been talked about or discussed. So, any other questions? Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all for showing up, and thank you to the staff as well for showing up and helping us out.